Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm your host, Jen Taylor Campbell. I'm a birth and bereavement doula, as well as an adoption and surrogacy doula. Doula means woman who serves. And although I love happy births, adoptions, and surrogacy, the pro bono part of my business is in bereavement. I'm here to help you. I'm also mom of 18, yes, 18 children, with over 30 years experience in the trenches as a mom myself. We have a huge blended family, and I've also experienced the loss of our adult son. Remember, give a shout out to those brave enough to share their stories on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm your host, Jen Taylor, and today I'm on with Bracha Goetz. And hello, how are you?
Wonderful. Happy to be here. Thank you.
You were a guest on my past podcast, so I get to see you again, but I don't know anything about this part of your story. So this is very exciting. Jump in and tell me about becoming a mom to 6 kids.
When I was growing up, I was super into, it was called women's lib then, you know?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So, I was very big in this. At my high school, I started the first women's forum, and it was like, we don't need to be doing these things. Why should women be doing this? Men should be doing that. We could do whatever we want. I remember I almost failed home economics because I refused to do the cooking. I said, I should be in workshops like the guys. Why do I have to be in home ec? The girls have to do, oh my goodness. So, I remember they passed me because I was willing to set the tables. That's what happened.
Oh my gosh. Home ec, I was born in 70, and home ec was a big deal. We took home ec, typing, what was the shorthand?
Right.
Still, right? I graduated in 1988 and we were still doing that. And I was allowed to take one woodworking class.
Wow.
It was so that wasn't that long ago that women were in those roles.
Yeah, so I'm way before you. So we could not get into woodworking. We had to have a protest, you were able, so they were allowed to do woodworking because we protested, It's like you could see these changes happening. When I was at Harvard, and then I went to medical school. There were very few women in medical school at that time. I think now there may be more women than men in the medical school classes. It's like everything has changed so much. In fact, when I got accepted into Harvard, I didn't get accepted into Harvard. I got accepted into Radcliffe College, which had been a women's school. And I graduated from Harvard. So that change happened while I was in it, So things were evolving. I wasn't the least bit interested in becoming a mother, having children, all these kind of things. No, it was profession. That's what I was, programmed to. I was encouraged to be whatever I wanted to be. That was great. And I love that. And that's what I love about feminism still to this day. We can be whatever we want to be. There shouldn't be any limitations on that. But the thing was, being a homemaker was denigrated. And I didn't realize that. I was picking up messages, very negative messages, that was not to be respected or appreciated. I didn't appreciate the idea of being a mother. I didn't appreciate my own mother. It was like, that's the kind of messages I was getting in those years. So it was a huge shift that happened in my life, because also I wasn't brought up in a spiritual kind of way, and I was searching for something that was missing, and I didn't know what it was. I remember writing something called A Dollhouse Reality, because when I was really young, like in the 1950s, beginning of the 60s, women were like, all you wanted was to be a homemaker. And that whole thing shifted so dramatically, so that you didn't want to do that anymore. And so the Dollhouse Reality that was printed I was like an editor of the high school newspaper, was about when she finally gets all that, it's a miserable life, you know, who wants that? So it was a huge shift that I went through, because despite everything and working toward my profession, I felt an emptiness. And that emptiness expressed itself symptomatically in food, in eating disorders, behavior. And the way I describe it is that it was a starving soul. Like I was starving for meaning in life. What was this all about? I felt like I was being pushed in a certain direction. And yet, really, what I wanted was like a happy home. Like I was searching for something like that, but you couldn't say that kind of thing. You couldn't definitely not say what you really wanted because you were moving in this other kind of way. It was a lot of conflicting feelings.
It's interesting that I mean, I know the shift, right? It went from being what you ideally wanted. World War II made big changes in all of that also, when women had to go to work. I mean, there was a lot of trauma for women being forced
Right,
into work in a totally different way. And then the men coming home and everybody like, okay, forget it. You can go back to what you did before. And a lot of women going thinking like, wait a minute, that's
right,
not right. So like that happened, and it was still like the happy little homebody, the 50s, the dress, the
right,
don't talk about your day. Your husband's had a long enough day as it is. Just ask him
right,
about him. It's crazy to see those advertisements.
right.
And then you're right. Like you went to college, and it's interesting you picked up so much on the fact that that didn't seem to be like a good plan to stay at home with your kids. And because it wasn't looked at fondly. I still think it's not. I don't think the women who decide to be stay-at-home moms now in 2023, still, it's like, well, what do you do? Oh, so you don't work. And I think, oh my gosh, I stayed home for 10 years. It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Right.
Going to work was a lot easier than staying home with your kids all the time. So you graduated from Harvard. What did you graduate with? And when you had eating disorders, you graduated from Harvard. At some point, you had to have gotten through some of that. You're searching. So when did your husband come involved? When did take me through the story? There's so many questions.
Okay. So let's see. I graduated from Harvard with a degree in psychology, and I was pre-med. I wanted to be a psychiatrist because I love the dynamics of the mind-body connection. I wanted to explore that. So I went on to medical school. And after my first year of medical school, and as an undergraduate, I was doing, like, even then, breakthrough research, of course, into the field of eating disordered behavior, while I was getting sicker and sicker during that time.
Yeah.
So I'm giving talks, I'm writing. I wrote a chapter in a book that's still used in the women's studies courses anthology around the country. It's Women Look at Biology, Looking at Women. And I wrote about why so many anorexics are females and how, you know, we were moved in that direction. So, I mean, I'm writing all this stuff just to show that an intellectual understanding is not enough at all to help heal a person, because
Yeah.
I got sicker and sicker when I went to medical school. So, like, and when you have an addiction, it's all done in secret. So nobody knew how I was suffering. I looked like a success on the outside.
Right.
And graduating with honors, going to medical school, everything's great. I was suffering so much, and my world was getting narrower and narrower. That's what happens in an addiction, you know? So all my energy was going into that instead of what I was supposed to be focused on. So I remember, actually, I went to a psychiatrist who was seeing the medical students. I told him, I unfolded to him how bad things were, how bizarre my behaviors were getting in this whole way. And he said to me, you know, I really think that you're looking for something spiritual from what you're describing. It was really unbelievable to have him say this. Also, because our backgrounds were so different. I think he was a Japanese psychiatrist, as I remember. And I was talking about that I was going to Israel for the summer, and he goes, I think in your heritage you need to explore it. And that's what happened. I went for 6 weeks to Israel that summer, and I didn't come back for 10 years.
Oh,
I
okay. I forgot.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I really changed my whole life at that point. I found my roots. With my roots, I was able to grow. I would say the world that had turned very gray, the colors came back. I began to appreciate things. I developed gratitude for simple things in life. I I basically nourished my starving soul. And it really turned my life around. And actually, my memoir is about this whole transformation, because now that's what I do. I really spend my time. Well, I've written like many, many children's books. I'm writing to the girl I used to be,
Mm.
in explaining deep spiritual concepts in the most basic, simple, joyful way, so that children can have these basic guidelines about life early on, and they don't have to play catch up like most of us had to do. So, oh, and I met my husband a few months after I began studying about my heritage, because he was also doing the same thing. He's a person that wasn't brought up in a spiritual way, and he came back to his roots. And we ended up living there for together like about 8 years, and now then we moved back to the States. We raised our 6 children, and now that our children are launched with their own families, we're actually returning to live in Israel.
Oh,
Me and
wow.
my husband.
Okay, that was a change. That was a plot twist. But how beautiful that is that you're coming full circle. You you married. Were you excuse me, you weren't against getting married. You were just against being a stay-at-home mom.
Oh, I remember talking about, even I was against marriage at one point, all these free new ideas. I was a creative kind of person. So, in the 60s, it was like you just launch on you you are excited about all these new concepts. Why not? Why do you have to get married? I remember bringing this up with my relatives, and they were like, "Oh, don't talk like that." They were, you know, um, not coming from that same revolutionary place that we were at that time. Yes.
What changed your mind to get married? Because this is a pretty significant shift.
Yes. What
Yeah.
changed my mind to get married?
Yeah.
It's a whole different concept. What I was began to understand, what I was taught, were really deep mystical concepts that all go back to gratitude.
Mhm.
I I I learned about the pleasure ladder, which is like the 5 levels of pleasure. Why does a person get stuck on an addiction? Because what they want is lasting pleasure in their life. They feel a scarcity of pleasure. They don't feel that there's an abundance of pleasure available to them. They feel disempowered. So the recognition that we have the power to bring pleasure into our lives at any moment changed my life. Recognizing that we bring pleasure in, lasting pleasure, through gratitude. And it's gratitude to source, gratitude to the energy that's flowing and connecting all of us. It's the source energy is in everything we see, all the natural things, all the vegetation, the beautiful blue sky, the people we meet, everything. And just opening up to all that is what changed my life. So the physical pleasures are the lowest level, the natural physical pleasures, and the next level is love. So my idea of love changed so much. Love, through the definition that I learned, is focusing on the virtues of another. What do you really appreciate about someone else? With that definition, you could bring love into your life even when you're alone, by focusing on, let's say in prison, on a grandmother that once did something kind for you, that could fill you with a warm emotional feeling of encouragement that can uplift you and help you to be a better person. So love is available to us at any moment. We can bring it into our own lives through focusing on the virtues of another. And the husband that I chose was really different from the kind of people I was dating before that too. I was looking for something different. I was looking for a person that was grounded and stable and yet could also soar spiritually too as well. And a person I could trust, a person that had the same kind of goals as I had in life. Yeah.
So you change your mind and you guys decide to get married, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to know the story. And then when did kids come along and when did you decide to stay home with them? Because and also you didn't finish medical school.
Right. I was really home for 17 years till my youngest was in school full time. Yeah. And
Amazing.
I did some work at home. I also babysat other children. And you're talking about a person who never babysat, never cooked anything, all this stuff I didn't know a thing about when I got married, you know. I mean, I was so not groomed in that direction, you know. So I
Right.
didn't know about these things, and I denigrated all that type of stuff too. So it was
Right.
really a whole new learning for me to come to value it. And yeah, I write about that in my book too. Oh my gosh, the struggles to value all these
Yeah.
kind of things. And so I mean, I became pregnant pretty soon after we got married, like 3 months
Yep.
later, and that wasn't easy. Boy, that was a shock. I knew nothing about pregnancy or what that's all about, you know, and it was hard. Um, but oh my goodness, did I love being a mother? It was just incredible. I had no idea. And so I worked from home, babysitting and editing books and writing. I began doing that during those years. And I didn't start working outside my home until my youngest was 6. Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. It's an amazing story to stay home. When you got pregnant and you didn't know anything about it, I think the a lot of fear with women today still in pregnancy is the fear of the unknown, what they don't understand or they haven't experienced. So, your first labor, or your first pregnancy, or what things could go wrong. How how did you get through that pregnancy? Obviously, you had 5 kids after that, so either we forget or we don't care, 'cause, me too. Um,
Mhm.
when did you really tap into that? I know for me, like, giving pregnancy was amazing and hard, but giving birth, once I gave birth to my first daughter, I don't even think that there's a possible way to describe that kind of love. So
Yes.
what was that like for you? And was there just automatically a decision for you to stay home and do these jobs working from home instead of psychology?
Yeah. Yeah. I I wouldn't I basically couldn't leave. I felt like I just wanted to devote myself to this
Oh,
little baby. I remember when he first came out and I felt his head and it was warm. I couldn't believe it. He wasn't a doll. Like this was real, that warmth coming from his head. It was it changed my life that
yeah.
moment, you know? So the first time was the hardest. The pregnancy was so horrible. Being nauseous was such a shock. The overwhelming nausea. It was incredible. Couldn't stand up. I remember I was working in a nursing home in the very beginning months, and I just couldn't even stand up to help people. I could not do it, you know? So yeah, it was all really hard. And I felt myself changing, just becoming less of a selfish person and more of a giver. It changes you so much from the inside. You you just but yet not to be like um something denigrated either. To also recognize that you need to be nourishing yourself the entire time, experiencing the gratitude so that you don't become just a rag. You know what I mean? Of always
Yeah.
just giving and giving. Through the giving, also, you need to be nourishing yourself the entire time.
I agree, and that's a big thing. I wanna transition. I know you had 5 more kids after that, so they started coming, and you dedicated staying home with them. Somewhere in there with your psychology degree and becoming a mom, that whole situation, you stumbled on or started working with filling the emptiness within and the pleasure ladder. And also, I think everything goes back to gratitude also. I love the gratitude. I think that's key. But raising kids that have gratitude. So
Yes,
let's shift to that and how tell me about that. When did that happen and how did you do this?
I'm so glad you asked that. I did something so simple. One of the things I write about is that people think that being a homemaker is mindless. And I feel to be a really good homemaker, you have to really devote your intelligence and your creativity and your emotions to that. So I really, really tried to do that. I came up with some things that were so made powerful differences. Like this is so basic, but whenever I would hand anything to my children, I didn't let go of it. I would hold on. They're, I'm giving them, I'm giving them a water and they take it in their hands and I'm still holding on and I'm smiling. And then they realize, oh, thank you. It's something so basic, but
Mhm.
I just don't let go. I do it now with my grandchildren, but I don't have to do it. They already got it from their parents. So it's really pretty basic in them too. I my children are incredibly grateful people. And I'm so grateful for that. And my grandchildren are growing up that way too now, which is so awesome. So it's something so basic as this. You hand a piece of paper to a child and you don't let go. So they realize every single thing in life, from the littlest things, we have to express gratitude. And it transforms us as human beings when we do that. It brings us joy. That's the thing. That is the secret to joy in life.
I love that. Kids respond really quickly and really well to that. That happiness inside them. I mean, I think kids are born questioning and pushing boundaries and wanting to see what they can get away with. You know,
Yes.
I don't think they're malicious, but I don't think
Yes.
that they come out well behaved. And through all of that, teaching them those boundaries and what's acceptable, when you reward them in gratitude, it makes a huge difference in their lives. Huge.
Yes. Yes. The entitlement plague
Oh,
is so severe. This is
yeah.
how we change it, by instilling gratitude really early on. That's what I'm doing with all my children's books. It's instilling gratitude for so much in life. And my newest book, I got to tell you this one.
Okay.
Don't read this book. It's called Don't Read This Book. It's about it's that voice in your head is telling you don't read this book, because if you start to learn the techniques of that voice, you'll be able to overcome it. The voice says things like, oh, if I just have that, I'll be happy.
Oh,
There's a picture in the book. The mother has a tons of all these things in the cart, and the girl at the checkout counter is pointing to something she wants, and the mother's saying no, and she's screaming. And meanwhile, there's so much great stuff in the cart already. And that's how it works. It gets you say, oh, I just need that one thing. So once we're aware that that voice is working on us to do that, to make us miserable, we can recognize it. Oh, that's that voice again. I'm going to focus on what I already have. It's getting us to focus on that one thing. Instead, I'll focus on what I have. This is what makes the change. and we could do this all the time in our life. Let's say the voice will say, I just want that one piece of cake. That's all I need. Of course, that won't happen because, like, with certain foods are meant to. They're like designed to be addictive, so you end up overeating them. But like, let's say that we want that one piece of cake, and then it leads to more. So you do that in the morning. You say, I don't feel like getting up. So I'll just stretch a little bit and that feels good. And you just stretch a little more. And you use the same techniques that that voice is using on you. You use it to benefit you. And what I show in the book at the end, this book, it took me 30 years to write because I didn't get the last piece of wisdom until last year. And that's this. That voice, it really wants you to overcome it.
Mm.
It's there like a barbell. It's pushing you to use your gratitude muscles. It really doesn't want you to listen to it. It wants you to push it off and say, oh, you're trying to get me. I can push you off and experience gratitude in life. So it's really interesting. These are the important things that even young children can absorb in order to lead lives that are full of joy.
Bracha, I love having you on. We talked about this in the first episode, and I have that in the description with all the ways that people can get in touch with you and all of your books. And I love your story. So different than so many stories. I love where you came from and where you ended up because it is remarkably different. Thank you so much for sharing with me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.